The crown has always been a heavy burden, but lately, the weight has become unbearable. Behind the gilded gates of the palace, a quiet revolution is unfolding, one that has nothing to do with royal tradition and everything to do with a hidden power struggle. As the world watches, a secret warrant is signed, and the balance of power shifts in the blink of an eye. The whispers in the halls of Scotland suggest that a queen is being quietly ushered into the shadows, while another prepares to step into the light. But why now? And what was so dangerous that it had to be hidden behind a veil of official silence? The story you've been told is only the surface. The truth lies in the documents that were never meant to be seen. The air in the high-security courtroom was thick, heavy with the scent of aging paper, polished wood, and the suffocating weight of a crumbling legacy. For Harry, the long walk to this witness stand was not merely a physical journey. It was the final destination of a path that began in the long, cold shadows of a gilded cage. He had spent his entire life in the corridors of Kensington Palace, a place where history pressed down on his shoulders like an invisible iron cloak. Even years later, the phantom scent of his mother's signature perfume, a mix of white flowers and fading hope, still seemed to linger in the drafty hallways. It was a constant, haunting reminder of a world that demanded his perfection while systematically stripping away his privacy. To the outside world, Harry lived a life of fairy tale privilege, but behind the heavy velvet curtains, he felt like a spare part in a grand, unfeeling machine. His identity had been fractured for decades, splintered by the relentless, blinding flash of paparazzi bulbs that felt less like media attention and more like sniper fire. Every public outing was a battlefield. Every private moment was a potential headline. He was a prince, yes, but he was also a man searching for a sense of belonging in a world that only valued his title. He felt exposed, fragile, and utterly trapped in a cycle he had not chosen. When Meghan entered his life, she did not just arrive as a partner. She arrived as a revelation. She brought with her a breath of fresh air and a perspective that felt like an exit strategy. In those early, whispered conversations held in secret, candlelit cottages far away from the prying eyes of the palace staff, the seeds of what the world would later call Megxit were first planted. At the time, Harry believed they were talking about freedom, about creating a new life where they could be masters of their own destiny. He was captivated by her vision, convinced that together they could build a sanctuary that the rigid walls of the institution could never provide. However, as we look back, the atmosphere of those early days feels less like a spontaneous romance and more like an orchestrated departure. There was an intoxicating fever to their alliance, a sense that they were rewriting the rules of the monarchy itself. Harry truly believed he was the bold architect of his own liberation, the prince who was finally brave enough to walk away from his inheritance for the sake of his heart. He saw himself as the hero of his own story, moving toward a brighter future, blissfully unaware that the complex blueprints for this escape were being drawn by hands far more strategic and perhaps far more cynical than his own. As the court clerk prepares to unread the private correspondence from the earliest days of their whirlwind courtship, a chilling question hangs in the heavy silence. Was the so-called Great Escape truly a romantic rescue mission, or was it a carefully staged abduction of a prince's long-standing loyalty, designed to serve a purpose he could not yet see? As the documentary lens shifts to the peak of their royal duties, the psychological pressure reaches a crescendo. We delve into the internal struggle of a man torn between 1,000 years of tradition and the magnetic pull of a woman who promised him the world. The narrative captures the hidden loneliness within the cheering crowds. Harry, ever the protector, becomes increasingly isolated from his brother and father, fueled by a narrative of us against them. Behind closed doors, we witness the subtle psychological shaping. The way Meghan's secret plan began to manifest in PR maneuvers and media leaks that Harry viewed as defensive strikes, but the court now frames as offensive gambits. Harry found himself caught in a web of his own making. He was the public face of the royal family's modern evolution, yet he was privately becoming a stranger to his own kin. The tension was palpable in every room he entered. The Spare found a new purpose as a protagonist in a Hollywood-caliber drama. Yet he remained fundamentally unaware that his every move was being cataloged and analyzed for a future he could not yet see. The PR maneuvers weren't just for damage control. They were tools of leverage, designed to slowly decouple him from the institutional support that had kept him upright for his entire life. He clung to the narrative that he was reclaiming his dignity, but he was actually losing his grip on reality. Each inflammatory interview and each public statement felt like a liberation, but to those watching from the outside, it looked like a systematic dismantling of his reputation. Harry was becoming a gilded puppet, dancing to a rhythm he thought was his own, while the strings were being pulled by a more calculated vision. He believed he was fighting for truth, yet the documentation now surfacing suggests that the truth was being carefully curated long before it ever hit the front pages of the tabloids. He was a man drowning in a sea of his own emotions, clutching onto a life raft that was actually an anchor. The tragedy of this period was the absolute blindness of the protagonist. Harry was convinced that he was leading the charge into a new, freer era. He didn't see the slow burn of bridges happening around him. He didn't realize that by destroying the institution, he was also destroying the only home he had ever known. He was a hero in his own mind, but the history books were already being written with a very different title for him. Just as the couple prepares to announce their final departure to the world, a forgotten, encrypted email surfaces in the judge's hands. An email that threatens to reveal the true architect of the royal rift and the dark ultimatum that forced the king's hand. The narrative returns to the present, focusing on the harrowing moments of the judicial discovery. The setting is sterile. The emotional stakes are volcanic. We explore the deep, unsettling darkness of Harry's realization as the judge uncovers evidence of Meghan's strategic manipulation, a paper trail of PR consultants, media strategy documents, and private directives that predated their marriage by months. The psychological impact is devastating. The truth Harry had defended with such ferocity, the narrative he had staked his entire identity on, is revealed to be a carefully scripted reality. We see the physical manifestation of his grief, the bowed head, the trembling hands, and the tears that represent the death of an illusion. This is not the anger of a prince. This is the quiet, hollowed-out agony of a man who has just discovered that his closest companion was also his most sophisticated strategist. The chapter dwells on the isolation of this moment. He is a man without a country, a man without a family, and now, a man who cannot even trust the sanctuary of his own home. The betrayal is not just personal, it is existential. It strips away the armor he had been wearing for years. In the silence of the courtroom, the documents are laid bare. We see the dates, the times, and the names of the consultants. It is a map of a deception. Every spontaneous moment, every truth-telling interview, and every defensive maneuver is laid out in cold, black ink. For Harry, the world is shifting under his feet. The woman he loved, the woman he gave up everything for, is no longer the partner he thought he knew. She is a stranger who had been guiding his path toward a cliff's edge for reasons he is only just beginning to comprehend. The confusion is etched into his features, a mix of disbelief and a growing, cold clarity. He looks toward the gallery, but finds no comfort there. The royal family is gone. The public is divided, and he is left standing in the wreckage of a life he built on a foundation of sand. The realization hits him with the force of a physical blow. He had not been the savior of the monarchy or his family. He had been the pawn in a much larger, much colder game of power. The documents didn't just expose her strategy. They exposed his own gullibility. It is a moment of total, crushing vulnerability. As the judge pauses, eyeing Harry with a flicker of icy, professional pity, he prepares to reveal the final, most damning piece of the plan, a secret directive that specifically involved the memory of Princess Diana, a move that proves the betrayal was not just political, but deeply, unforgivably personal. In the aftermath of the courtroom revelation, the story enters a phase of deep psychological reflection. Harry wanders through the hollowed-out spaces of his life in California. The freedom he sought now feeling like a self-imposed, gilded exile. This chapter explores the haunting themes of guilt and the crushing question of what now. We witness a man attempting to reconcile the Megan he loved, the woman who promised him peace, with the cold, calculated strategist revealed in the court's documents. It is a cinematic exploration of a shattered psyche, moving through the stages of grief, denial, burning anger, and finally, a cold, hard clarity that leaves no room for comfort. The legacy of the House of Windsor looms large in his mind, a constant, nagging reminder of what was sacrificed for a vision that was never, ever entirely his. The tone is somber and poetic, capturing the quiet, lonely tragedy of a prince who burned every single bridge, only to find the island he landed on was sinking beneath the tide. He walks the beaches, not as a man at peace, but as a man haunted by the ghosts of his choices. Every wave that crashes against the shore seems to echo the destruction he left behind in London. He is a prince of nothing, caught in the debris of a narrative he helped write but no longer understands. The silence of his home in California is deafening. There are no cameras, no cheering crowds, and no adoring fans. There is only the truth of the documents, stored away in a legal file, waiting to be unleashed upon the world. He realizes that he cannot hide from this. He has been exposed, not just to the public, but to himself. The shame is a weight that he carries in his chest, a heavy, sinking feeling that he has failed the very people he once claimed to protect. He sees his own reflection in the windows of his mansion and barely recognizes the man staring back, a man who gave away his soul for a dream that turned out to be a nightmare. He thinks of his father, of the duty he rejected, and of the brother he alienated. The distance between California and London feels like a canyon he can never cross. The freedom he chased has become his prison. He is a rebel without a cause, a man who reached for the stars and only succeeded in burning his own world to the ground. The finality of it all is suffocating. He is finally ready to accept the consequences, but he knows the damage is permanent. Standing on the edge of the Pacific, Harry reaches for his phone, his thumb hovering over his father's old contact number. He prepares to make one final, desperate, broken call back to London, but the screen remains dark. Is it truly too late to return to the fold, or has the bridge been burned beyond repair? The final chapter is an emotional post-mortem on the cost of a hijacked heart. It reflects on the enduring, inescapable nature of royal duty and the jagged scars left by a public execution of trust. We see Harry navigating a world where he is neither fully a royal nor fully a civilian, a lost ghost caught forever between two continents and two versions of himself. The narrative looks toward an uncertain, flickering future, pondering the slim possibility of rebirth from the ashes of such a public, devastating betrayal. The emotional arc concludes not with a neat, happy resolution, but with a weighty, reflective, and heavy silence. It is a story of a man who sought to save his wife from the pressures of the crown, only to realize in the final hour that he was the one who needed saving, from the very person he gave everything to. The documentary ends on a haunting, atmospheric shot of the palace gates in London, cold and forever closed, and a prince alone in the dark, finally seeing the world for what it truly is. The masks have fallen. The scripts have been burned. There is nothing left but the raw, unfiltered, and painful reality of his circumstances. He is no longer the spare, nor is he the rebel. He is simply Harry, a man stripped of his titles, his influence, and his illusions. The betrayal was not just an event. It was a total loss of self. He looks back at the journey, the weddings, the speeches, the interviews, and sees them for what they were, tactical moves in a game he didn't know he was playing. The weight of the crown's shadow is not in the jewels or the power. It is in the knowledge that he was never in control. He was the most famous man in the world, and yet he was the least informed. This realization is his final, agonizing transformation. It is the end of the prince and the beginning of a man who must now learn to walk on his own, without a crown, without a title, and without the woman who led him astray. As the camera pans back, leaving him small and insignificant against the vastness of the horizon. The viewer is left with a singular, lingering thought. How many others have been led by love into a trap they couldn't see? The palace remains. The monarchy continues. But the man who left the gates behind is changed forever. He has paid the highest price possible for his independence, the loss of his truth. The screen fades to black, leaving only the sound of the wind, a lonely, mournful whistle that sounds like the final, closing breath of a legacy. As the final credits begin to roll, a voiceover asks one last, lingering question that stays with the audience long after the screen goes dark. In a high-stakes game of crowns and cameras, who was truly the predator, and who was the prey? And does the truth actually matter when the kingdom has already moved on?